we turn our attention to what might be called the libertarian left, or more popularly, anarchism.
This is the same logic shared by Marx and Freud.
Functioning libertarian socialist institutions, I think they are an interesting model that I think is highly relevant.
Hello. Bonjour. Guten Tag. You're getting us in a post-conference high. We are recording in September, when Hannah and I have been traveling girlies. I think Hannah's is the more excruciating tale of all. So I think I'll share mine first. I went to a conference in Manchester for the German Historical Society, and everything went great. I was a part of a roundtable, met some people in real life. Who would have thought? Everything was fine till I'm literally trying to get home. So basically, I get to Manchester Piccadilly after running, by the way, because I thought I was missing my train. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna miss my train. So I was running, sweating, like pits stained. Like I looked horrible. And then come to find out, the entire station had been shut down because some idiot decided to climb on top of Manchester Piccadilly. And like, because everything's electrified, they had to shut it down so he wouldn't die. So we had to wait on firefighters and police to like get there, get him off, and then they had to restart all the trains. So my train got canceled, obviously. It was like an hour and a half I had to wait, almost 2 hours. And then my train, once I actually got on it, changed destinations 3 times. I was stressed. I am trying to get compensation for this because honestly, they need to give me back my money. That was bad. But I think Hannah's entire saga
there's too much that happened to like kind of talk about it here. So it was my first time flying by myself, so very nervous the first time I flew. I went on 7 planes in like 2 weeks because I had to fly to a conference, fly back, fly to the conference, fly back, fly to another conference, fly back, and then there was 2 planes during that one, so that was great. And before I went on the first plane, my mum called me. She cleans like on the side of her. She's got 2 jobs. One's like working in a factory and one's cleaning holiday homes in Cornwall. And so she rang me and was like, "This farmhouse is haunted." And I was like, "What do you mean it's haunted?" And she was like, "No, it has bad energy." So I had to call my friend to come and help me clean it. And I was like, "What happened in there? Is it haunted?" And she was like, "Yeah, there was a book that moved." And I was like, "Okay, it moved apparently 3 times." But then I was like, "There's 2 of you cleaning in there. Are you sure you both didn't just move it and then forget you moved it?" But then she said to me that she was going to bring my younger sister into the haunted farmhouse.
She is not going to go into a haunted farmhouse.
I don't think she told her it was haunted. Because sometimes she gets my sister to help her clean, and then pays her like pocket money. Yeah.
Your sister's also, dare I say, one of the most like teenagers of teenagers.
Oh yeah.
And she will stand her ground. If she knew it was haunted, she would have been like, absolutely not.
She would have been like, "I'm sitting in the car. I'm not doing this one."
But no, I think my favorite personal story is what happened to you in Dublin.
Oh yeah, so the first conference I went to was in Dublin, and it was like,
it might be UCD.
Yeah, it's UCD. So they have this big like lake, and there was a swan in the lake, and I'm already scared of swans because I got bit by one. I don't get on with animals, and so we were looking at this lake. I was being very cautious. So then there was loads of seagulls, and I dropped my like I was eating like a chicken sandwich, and I dropped a piece of chicken, and I got tagged by so many seagulls. And it was right before my talk was going to happen, and I was like, I hope nobody saw that, and we'll comment on it.
I would have been like, I have a question. Yes, for Miss Ayers. Your talk. Thank you for your talk. It was absolutely fascinating. However, what would you do about seagulls in the museum space?
I would have cried.
I will say at my conference, because it was a round table, so I didn't have a script. And as someone that edits me constantly, you know I do not do well without a script. So someone asked a very innocent question, and it was directed at me. And because a round table's a conversation style, you don't really have a moment to process things. And I just said the first thing that came to my mind, and it was rather rude. And then thank God that my other panelists were like experts and like really well off in their field, and were like, what's she meant to say? It was I'm obviously not going to give details because this was a private question at a round table, but it was just like, I wasn't wrong.
I'm not wrong. It's the way I'm putting it. When I was giving my talk, I have a script and I had sort of memorized it, but sort of not, because when I get in front of a crowd, I forget everything I'm going to say. So I need like the script with me, but I use it to like gesture. And I was talking and I forgot what the next point was. And I like slammed my hands down on the desk. I was like, it didn't call for that amount of energy and I had to course correct.
Yeah, so basically, we've had a time at our conferences, and hopefully we can actually in the future give some like guides for students in the first conference, because I feel like each time, it's always a different experience, even if it's the same conference, especially if you're traveling for yours. But today has nothing to do with conferences and everything to do with the early 20th century. Surprise, surprise. So today's essay is on Avant-Garde and Kitsch by Clement Greenberg from 1939. So this was a piece that I had been wanting to discuss last season because it's a sort of a weird essay. It's something that I studied when I was in undergrad and really didn't understand very well. So I kind of wanted to revisit this with a guest, but time didn't align. So now basically we're doing it now for season 3. And yeah, it's a really odd piece. It's a short one. So if you are interested in this piece, you can get it like read within an afternoon easily. However, it is not an easy piece. So I kind of want to get Hannah's thoughts on this. Like, what do you think about the essay?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't know, at parts, it's easier to understand because there's a lot of like repetition of points just said in different ways. So if you don't understand it the first time, you'll probably understand it like the third time it's said. But I'm not as familiar with art history or even specific artists, although a lot of the artists are like very famous artists, right? And so sometimes my brain just like skimmed over the names and I was like, yeah, sure.
Also, it does end with the greatest like correction I think I've read in an essay. Hannah, would you do me the honors?
Oh yeah, let me get it. It says, P.S. To my dismay, I learned years after I saw this print that Repin never painted a battle scene. He wasn't that kind of painter. I had attributed someone else's picture to him. That showed my provincialism with regard to Russian art in the 19th century. And then it's written, I think this correction was in 1972, it says.
40 years later, so there is still hope for our PhDs. So basically, this is an essay that's very art heavy. However, I think it speaks to larger contexts, especially it is being released in 1939, which is a really significant time, obviously, of the Second World War. America's involvement in the Second World War, as well as migration from Europe to New York City for the arts in particular, because Hitler's rise and succinct invasion of France. So it is a really interesting essay to get from that specific time and sort of how eerily it is almost echoing things that are going on today politically. But I guess let's start with who is Clement Greenberg. So there is a lot known about his personal life, especially with artists, but I think that it's not really as important as I think like explaining Walter Benjamin is. But Clement Greenberg lived from the 16th of January, 1909 to the 7th of May, 1994. He was an American essayist known mainly as an art critic closely associated with the American modern art in the mid-20th century and a formalist aesthetician. He is best remembered for his association with the art movement Abstraction Expressionism and the painter Jackson Pollock, as well as his relationship with Helen Frankenthaler. His essays on post-painterly and abstraction set up the New York scene during the early 20th century as he was an integral component between critics and the painter. He often had direct hand on what was going on within the scenes and was able to describe the works within the market. He's sort of a really strange middleman, where he has the, I want to say, influence and intelligence and cultural say, as I would say, a Benjamin would, but he's more directly associated with the art market, especially later on in his life. I would actually say that he's similar to Susan Sontag in forms that he is an intelligista, a tastemaker, and he is an art collector. So he is this sort of jack of all trades, master of none type of situation, but you can kind of see why he's like an art history 101 essay, especially with this one. It's short, it's to the point, and it leads into larger conversations about the position of art, especially in this early 20th century boom of New York City modernism.
Yeah, I also, the only thing I can add is I think we mentioned kitsch in the episode on camp that we did in season 1. So if you enjoyed that episode, hopefully you'll enjoy this one because it's kind of, as I understand it, a little bit of a precursor.
Oh, definitely. Well, kitsch came out many years, like 20 years before.
Yeah.
We get, I think almost 40 years. Because this is 39, Sontag released, 60s, 70s? So this is sort of, you can't understand camp without understanding kitsch. But this is a more complicated version of what kitsch is. So I guess we should start with the actual definition of what is the avant-garde. So Clement Greenberg's early works focused mostly within literature and theater. In 1939, however, he was captured by the art scene around him and wrote the essay that we're currently discussing. The essay was first published in the journal Partisan Review, and as stated from the Wikipedia, quote, that true avant-garde art is the product of the Enlightenment's revolution of critical thinking, and as such recoils from the degradation of culture in both mainstream and capitalist communist society, while acknowledging the paradox that, at the same time, the artist dependent on the market or the state remains attached by an umbilical cord of gold. End quote. So Greenberg's definition of what avant-garde is basically, avant-garde arose in order to defend aesthetic standards from the decline of taste perpetuated by mass production of consumer society, and he basically saw kitsch and art as opposites. So the avant-garde is basically the genuine article. It is seeing the genuine Van Gogh in a gallery. He uses Picasso very much in this argument because Picasso is a very specific taste, especially this is in the 30s before Picasso became gauche. So it is a lot of Picasso pieces that are sort of stirring and shaking people in their boots are being opened up in the Museum of Modern Art at this time. So the avant-garde is this close relationship with these new forms of art that are arising, that are making people quite uncomfortable, that are pushing the envelope, and that are integrally, they are political and they are controversial.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed is he talks a little bit in the essay about how he says on page 4, the really important issues are left untouched because they involve controversy. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so I looked up avant-garde just to get a sense of it from the Tate because they have definitions for all these art movements, which is really helpful. And they also usually have examples from within their collection. And they said, quote, because of its radical nature and the fact it challenges existing ideas, processes, and forms, avant-garde artists and artworks often go in hand with controversy. And I wondered, Paula, if you have more to say about that, know more about that, because I was really interested.
Yeah, and I will say it's not controversy in the way you think, or it can be. So, the biggest controversy, I think, would be the work of Jackson Pollock, because you would look at it, and now, because we're so used to seeing a Jackson Pollock and, it's sort of always there, we kind of know what we're looking at. But at the time, this is really revolutionary. You're coming in from the late 19th century with works that are starting to challenge the Academy. So you get the works of people like Manet and the Monets. So these different forms of art styles that are sort of challenging what we consider traditional composition and traditional storytelling. And then you get to the early 20th century, where you get Picasso's, one of my favorite paintings at the MoMA, which is Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. It didn't premiere till the 30s and 40s because it wasn't appropriate to put up. And it's, this painting of these nude women at a brothel. And it is these subjects portrayed in a really uncomfortable manner, but it's still something you can kind of read. But then you have things like Jackson Pollock, which is a black canvas with using gravity and using the actual method of painting as the art itself. So it's this thing where people say, like, well, I can do that. No, you can't. So Jackson Pollock used to get a blank canvas, and the way he would move, it's sort of difficult to explain without just via audio, but I'm demonstrating to Hannah that as he painted, the paint would drip and he would use inertia. So it's only the way that he did it. It's only his hand that can produce this sort of thing, because it's based on height, it's based on strength, and he knew where the paint was going. So people that actually watched him work, and I know there's films that are open access now that show his painting style, and you can see his eyes going ahead and sort of the hand following. So the controversy there is that this is not an easily legible piece. You have to sort of sit there. When you see a Pollock in person, what you try to do is follow the paintbrush. And at the end of it, you're kind of dizzy. It's kind of nauseating because your head's going back and forth and you're just like, whoa, And that is a controversy in itself, because it is a very particular style. It's a very particular moment in time where it's looking at methodology as the actual work, not the actual product. And in that, there's where the controversy is, how do you sell that? How do you buy that? So it's controversy in a way where it's a little bit different. It's some people will say not that important, but here's where we go into the essay. This type of art cannot be reproducible. So you can get a picture of this painting, but it's so dependent on seeing it in person, because you can see the globs of paint. There's people that still work at the MoMA that remember when these pieces came in and they were still wet because it was so thick with paint that it didn't actually dry on time for exhibition. So these are sort of pieces that are alive. So you can't reproduce that. It goes back to that Walter Benjamin thing. It always comes back to Benjamin, baby. So yes, that is sort of the controversy within painting. And obviously there's actual controversy when you get things like the pop art movement, where it's using copyrighted material and then reproducing it. Is that then avant-garde? Is that kitsch? But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Like, did you think I answered this question succinctly?
Yeah. So it's also interesting about this reproducibility, because when I used to be in art class, one of the hardest things is you often have to copy other people's art just to get a sense of how they did it. But often you don't have the materials that they had. And I found that absolutely infuriating and impossible, right? Because then, you're asking me to do it, but I don't have what they had. And also, often you get taught not just copying their styles, right, but the methods they use, because often those methods are actually more important than, can you look at this and reproduce it by eye? It can be really difficult.
Well, it's also, this is the time where we're going from studios of these little factories of artists to an individual. So even in the mid 1800s, you're getting individual artists. And obviously these are highly educated artists, but they're playing around, they're toiling around with new methods and new methodologies. So by the time the 20th century start, you're getting a lot of really weird art coming out. You have things that are like collage. You have things that are using art in a way that you didn't think. And, you get like Die Brücke with the Neue Säglichkeit in Germany, where they're making these prints and they're grotesque. They're like, the art scene's changing, and he's sort of, Greenberg is looking around at what's happening around him with the rise of war and all these things, and he's noticing that there is an attachment between the alterations and forms of style and all these things with post-World War I life. You know, there's no longer a Kaiser. There's no longer, a lot of these countries are now being renamed, and then eventually after the Second World War, even more things are changing. So there is a connection between these changes in art, the individualism of art, and also the rise of capitalism as a methodology of reprinting and sending out art. It's not like it never existed before. It's just the number and the mass. And I think it's really interesting because if you culminate a lot of the episodes we've done in the past, it sort of comes back to this analysis of early 20th century and reproduction.
We keep having these conversations, at least in the Benjamin episodes, and particularly I think in the live episode, of what is authentic or what makes something have a certain authenticity, right? Like, because when you mention collage, I think that's really interesting. I love collage.
Me too.
I love it.
And actually, Picasso, once more, a connection. It was Picasso and, I can't remember the other person. And I'm sure you will insert it somewhere in the notes once I actually remember. Sorry, y'all. Because collage was not on our list.
No. But like, collage is really interesting because you're often taking other people's pictures. Again, the copyright issue. You're often taking other people's pictures, rearranging them into a new piece of art, but then where's the aura with that? Where's the authenticity? And then if you make a print of that and send it out, like, what is happening there as well?
I will say, when you do the collage, it is done by your own hand. If you have made sufficient enough changes to the actual thing where it's no longer recognizable from its original composition, say you get a picture of a house in like Southern Living Country or whatever it's called, Southern Home Living, something like that. I don't remember. But you add you add space lasers and, an alien popping out of there and some lady in a Victorian dress in the middle of the kitchen. If you do significant enough change it becomes a brand new object. Does it lose the original quote unquote authenticity of this reproduced material? Sure, but it takes on a new form. And that is where I think the art comes in. That would be if this was the first time it was ever done, this would be the avant-garde, But then with reproducibility, it becomes something else. So it sort of like leans into that kitsch thing. Where I mentioned authenticity was when Clement Greenberg was talking about strikes of genius, how he doesn't really care about the end product. What he's looking at is the process of art creation itself. He's comparing the production of art to the production of literature because someone has to sit down and come up with this. And that is where it is an avant-garde movement. They're coming up with something new, something novel, something from their imagination onto a piece of work, whether it be literature, art, theater, because he was a theater guy. A music is another way you're stringing together, notes have always existed, music notes have always existed, but you're arranging them in a new way to create a new product. And that for him, I believe, is the avant-garde. And you kind of can't separate authenticity or the concept of authenticity and the avant-garde.
This was kind of reminding me of, I really enjoy artists on TikTok. They're kind of controversial, right? But they buy art from like charity shops and then they draw or paint over the top of it. And in the comments, all you get are people being like, well, you're like ruining somebody's art. And then a lot of the time they reply by being like, it's a print or like it's not the original. But even if it was the original, it's kind of languishing in a charity shop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's also, that is a form of avant-garde because if there's a knee-jerk reaction, you're doing something that is going opposite the grain. You're irritating people. But yeah, no, it is a new form of collage. I also love those. I like the person that draws little tiny cows in the sky.
Yeah.
Love it. But like, is it taking something that's absolutely, we can say usually really bad because it's at a charity shop, so no one wanted it in their home. and turn it into something new, something that, may cause a laugh. It will cause some form of reaction. And, actually, this is a good way of leaning into what we define as kitsch, because these types of TikTok arts can technically fall into something that we now regard as kitsch. So, using a JSTOR article by Ed Simmons from 2020, I believe, called In Defense of Kitsch, I'm going to borrow their definition. So, kitsch is actually a 19th century German word for cheaply made, disposable versions of fine art pieces. Kitsch denotes an accidental style or mode that often denotes tackiness and provincial tastelessness, end quote. And honestly, I could not have said it better myself. Kitsch is sort of the art that you buy from Primark, from TK Maxx here in the UK, TJ Maxx everywhere else. Why? Don't know. Look it up. But it's this sort of commercial bad stuff that is always on display. It is live, laugh, love. It is everywhere. It's cheap. It's if you just need something on your wall, that doesn't mean a single thing. Hotel art is a great example of this. It's just meaningless. Even if someone actually drew it themselves, it's still like bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, when you spoke about hotel art, I wonder if part of it is like properly just unoffensive. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is just anybody could find it. It's fine.
Well, it's also trying to project an image. So this is where I'm going to get a little bit color theory, slightly, not really, because it's not my specialty. But basically, the way restaurants, hotels, all these public spaces are organized are done purposefully. Someone goes in, has studied the way people react to certain colors, certain textures, certain, smells, scents, colors, and lights. Lights are extremely important for hotels and restaurants. And they try to reproduce this as much as possible. So they rely on these kitschy, kind of horrible pieces that are, like you said, inoffensive, but also inspire you to buy more.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you go into a hotel, let's say you're going to a Hilton, like a really nice Hilton, it's usually very clean, white, pristine. It's also paired with like bamboo color, like very light beiges and greens, because you're supposed to think this is a vacation. This is luxury. This is nice. This is clean. Meanwhile, you go into a McDonald's and it's red. Everything's like red, yellow, all these like colors, because those unconsciously make you hungry. Yeah. So there's also associations, green, money, all these things. But usually these things are done in a way that's inoffensive, that's easily reproduced, so that's easily buyable, so that things can be consumed. So we live in a world of kitsch. It's completely normal. It's when you bring in kitsch into your home, your personal space, I think that's where it's interesting for Clement Greenberg, because he doesn't say it within the essay, but he is saying avant-garde, these spaces of prestige. And who's buying these pieces? Because like museums are still a new thing. The MoMA had just opened up in New York, where there was actually a connection between the public and the private sector to buy art. But he's noticing that people don't want to look at these fancy pieces. They want something that's easy to read. So he's talking about like Repin, and it's still like really good art. It's beautiful. It's quite sad, but it's really beautiful. And he's like, peasants really like this in Russia. How true that is, we don't know. But he is speaking to this thing where like these are easy to read pieces. These are not inoffensive, but it is something people can relate to. Meanwhile, you look at a Picasso, and unless you have the education, something we're going to talk about a little bit later on, it doesn't really speak to you in the same way. You might like how it looks, but you're more likely going to buy the Repin over the Picasso. Even if they like the colors, they like the composition. They're like, wow, cool. Triangular face. I would rather have this in my home.
An example I brought up when we were talking about this before we started recording was I saw on TikTok somebody was making, they're quite big. They're like big, right? These frogs that are shaped like fruit. So it's like a frog and it'll have like a banana peeling around its face and then it'll be like yellow, right? And so they had all these different frogs, and they put them in a kiln. I can't remember what they're made of. And then people were looking at the price and they were selling them for like $900, right? And so there's this question of like, it is buyable, like you can buy it for your house and it has no other utility other than existing within your house. But it's also now like quite expensive as well. So like there's interesting, I guess, triangulation, at least what I'm seeing is people want to produce things. They want to produce things that you want to buy and put in your house, right? But then they also want to charge a fair amount for their labor because it is a labor intensive thing. You have to buy all the material, you have to electricity, everything, right?
You have to run tests to make sure that it can actually fire in the kiln.
Yeah, so it's a lot of like time. And then also like people are now, at least as far as I'm seeing on like TikTok and stuff, they're saying they don't want to spend loads of money on stuff that doesn't have like utility in the house. And you have the whole like overconsumption, like this rallying cry against overconsumption. And then, yeah, where are we landing?
Yeah, this is where I'm going to go off on a little rant. Sorry, y'all. This is where I really hate people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing. It's $900. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. Let's start off with that. Controversial yet brave opinion. Because labor is expensive. Because she's also this person, because I also follow her. She has like this really cute strawberry. I really want it, but I can't afford it. But I'm like, one day. She is making it by hand. She's buying the clay. She's doing the labor. She's probably renting out a kiln, which is expensive. And she's doing all this labor. And guess what? She can put the price. There's a lot of art from the past as Hannah always remembers in random days. There's Christ. That is just a jar with the crucifix in it. And it's high art. And it's technically a piece of the avant-garde, even though it has kitsch elements. Now, am I saying these pieces are avant-garde pieces? No, it's still kitsch, but it is expensive kitsch. And it's not part of this overconsumption thing because it is made by order. What is actual overconsumption is those weird Buddha statues that have no attachment to anything that are being sold at Primark for like 20, 30 quid that's probably made off from slave labor. So buy the frog art if you want it. Who cares? Let it live in your home. If it makes you, if it sparks joy, let it spark joy.
Yeah.
Like, stop. People want to make a living. End of rant. But what does this have to do with kitsch?
Yeah, so the other thing that we were going to talk about, so kitsch isn't just like pieces of physical art or like paintings and stuff like that. He also talks about kitsch in relation to literature, and you had really good examples of this.
Yeah, so Hannah kind of didn't understand or couldn't connect Greenberg's arguments about literature, because there is a certain section, I think it was like part 2, 3, 4. I kind of was like, you can skip this part. But he does talk about literature and kitsch. And Hannah was like, I don't understand this. And y'all, I actually understood, or at least I did. Please don't tell me otherwise. It will hurt my feelings. But kitsch in literature is sort of that strike of genius. So he uses Yeats, he uses Baudelaire. Like, he uses all this other, like, people that we hold as like pure geniuses. I would say also Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley literally created a new genre, So these are the people that are the creators, the avant-gardes of their field, the avant-gardes of their movements, of their poems, of their literature. The kitsch version of these things would be the beach read version. So what I said was, if Lord of the Rings was the avant-garde, Harry Potter would be the kitsch. And even though Lord of the Rings is extremely popular, I know this, so don't come for my neck. But Lord of the Rings is an entirely, like, built-in world. It is completely separated from the world we know now. It has elements of it, obviously, but it has its own language. It has its own, the Silmarillion that are, adding even more world building. You can learn Elvish. It is a completely separate world with its own canons and all these things. And, before the films, before even like the animated versions of these stories from the 60s and 70s, I believe, it was a popular enough object, much like, Shelley and Yeats and everyone else, but it was a specific type of market. It was a very novel idea to introduce this type of component. Harry Potter, you can see the direct lines and ties, and J.K. Rowling aside, it does speak to this sort of pop culture that was needed. It's not too dissimilar. It is easily consumable. If you walk down Oxford Street right now in London, you'll see a billion Harry Potter stores selling you as much items as possible. Whereas, obviously, this market does exist with Lord of the Rings, but not to the same degree. So that's where I meant with, the kitsch. Harry Potter is sort of like the beach read version of Lord of the Rings. You have to study with Lord of the Rings. Tom Bombadil is its own thing. But with Harry Potter, it's just so easy a child can read it. Yeah. And it's not saying it's bad or good. It's just, who's the market?
So I think the final kind of question on kitsch specifically is, who decides what taste is?
And what a loaded question that is, Hannah, because I don't know. But no, so Greenberg kind of has an idea of who's the tastemakers. So he says in 39, and I think we will argue at the end of this podcast who the tastemaker is now, but it is the bourgeoisie. The tastemakers are, because they are the ones that are in control of the market. They are the ones that you strive to become. You try to emulate. It's the reason why, people have Gucci belts and Balenciaga when they can't afford it. It is someone that we aspire to. So we treat them sort of as the avant-garde. We sort of replicate them. I'm going to pull a quote that sort of ties everything together. So Clement Greenberg says, quote, "If the avant-garde imitates the process of art, kitsch, we now see, imitates its effects." So kitsch is sort of the echo of the originality. It is the reproduction. It is the quote-unquote lesser value version. So we strive to wear that Balenciaga thing. Prada boots. I love a Prada boot. I can't afford it. So what do I do instead? I try to go for the dupe. I try to go for the other version that I can consume. And usually it's the less expensive version and the one that's more mass produced. So this sort of tastemaker thing is based on either, now it's celebrities and stardom, but at this time it's made by these originators of their movement, like the Pollocks, the Frankenthalers, the Picassos, all these youths, and they are then reproduced and consumed or imitated. When Picasso did his figures, a bunch of other people started copying his movement. Some were good, some were bad, but it's still, they're not the tastemaker, they're the response. How do you see this question being answered? I'm curious.
Who decides what taste is?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about it and I was like, I don't think celebrity is quite, it is sort of on the way out. Like people are talking about it, but it's not completely. We still venerate certain celebrities. Like Beyonce put out a whiskey. People are buying the whiskey. Beyonce puts out a haircut. People are buying the haircut. Do you know what I mean?
But there's also bad responses to this because I'm thinking of celebrities like Blake Lively who do a horrible hair care line and are, digitally crucified.
I think this is the thing, right? Because you see it with Chappell Roan, right? Big celebrity, people are literally going dressed in certain styles, like Midwest Princess and all this kind of stuff, right? And are dressing in drag, essentially, to go to the concerts. But then on the other side, people are like, oh, now she's getting too big for her boots. I don't think this, by the way. You should just leave her alone, right? Unless you want her to just disappear forever.
Yeah, go into the forest, never be found again.
Yeah. But I think there is that volatile nature of how you're viewed as a celebrity that I think has always been there, right? But now it's even more so because everybody can have a say on the internet.
this goes on to something that we have mentioned before, which is that avant-garde is going to cause a reaction. And it can be both positive and negative and neutral. There could be just neutrality. We're sort of in the neutral ground of a lot of things. But once more, would people regard Chappell Rowan as high art? Maybe not. But within the music genre, she is causing a stir. And whether or not it is within your tastes, it is a taste making.
Yeah.
So we're recording in September, so we just saw her VMA performance, and she's altering genres right now. So is Sabrina Carpenter, so is Olivia Rodrigo.
I was also thinking of still the case actually, like hyperpop is like this. It's not controversial. It is sort of controversial because some people are like, wow, that's just noise. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
But like other people are like, this is changing the way we understand music, right?
It's changing the way we produce music, consume it, and it's leading the way to its different newer forms of production. It's goes back to Clement Greenberg. We're alternating the methodology of music creation. Where it used to be, a room full of executives. Now someone can do it from their bedroom. So there is that weird thing about who is creating tastes now.
And I think that's the thing, right? You get people create stuff in their bedroom. Think of Billie Eilish, right? But creating music in your bedroom, right?
I think Lorde would be a really good example.
Yeah. But then you're upheld to the status of celebrity, right? Or you get a following, or you do X, Y, and Z. So then is the taste making coming from these bourgeois people, right?
It is a form of bourgeois tastemaking because you are sort of propelled into popularity, but something that Clement Greenberg, I think, is too early on with this essay that he cannot sort of fall into is that once you rise within the avant-garde, you automatically become kitsch. You automatically become status quo. You become consumerism. And that's sort of what happened with him. He started off as this like amazing art critic, and he still was an art critic, but he went from like rebellious talking against he in another essay he talks about the flatness of the canvas, but at some point these revolutionary techniques no longer become revolutionary. So it's kind of interesting to get this essay in a time where the switch is going to happen. It won't, at least in his time period, it doesn't happen for another 10, 20 years, but it does happen. Right now, these switches are happening within a day, where what's funny today is not funny the next day. What is super cool, and it leans into like stories of fast fashion and all these things, and we're sort of getting outside of our original argument. But the point is, taste making is something that, as we know now, has always been something held up by bourgeois either people or bourgeois ideas.
I think the other thing, and you can tell me this is not the case, but I think tastemaking now has more to do with visibility, right? And if you have more followers or you're more available to be seen, your ability to affect taste is more, right?
But that's always been the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you say about visibility, you're thinking about numbers in the current sense, but you have to think about, we didn't have social media back then. So visibility would be, in the art scene, would be your painting going up in one of the hottest galleries in the world, which was the MoMA at the time. That is visibility. I linked an article in response. It's like rethinking Clement Greenberg's essay in 2020. And it's this picture of this model from Vogue in front of a Jackson Pollock. That's visibility, baby. Yeah. This has always existed. There's artists that are always going to be on the way, like they're just going to be thrown to the side, even if their work is beautiful or the avant-garde. That's why sometimes we even revisit music from the past that wasn't held to the high degree standard that it used to be. There's that revision. We see how they were working within the zeitgeist, but the zeitgeist did not take them in. Instead, we're sort of looking at back in like nostalgic eyes. And, I did not expect this tastemaker question to go this long, but because I think it's something that Greenberg doesn't address. Instead, what he does is call it the cultivated spectator, which is a really interesting concept and something that I've been thinking about now, because he kind of ties in the cultivated spectator with the academia. And for those that are really into theory, I would say capital A academia. So I'm going to do another quote if you don't mind. So, quote, Greenberg says, ultimately, it can be said that the cultivated spectator derives the same values from Picasso that a peasant gets from Repin, since the scale and he is set to look at the picture by the same instincts that send the cultivated spectator. But the ultimate values which the cultivated spectator derives from Picasso are derived at a second remove, as a result of reflection upon the immediate impression left by the plastic values. End quote. So I like that with the cultivated spectator, the he, she, they, them, is then an echo away from the original concept. So Picasso's still, I guess, the ultimate cultivator of taste. But the spectator, we were talking about the bourgeois, the people consuming and saying that this is good, you know, the pitchfork critic of music, is still the cultivated spectator. They're not the creator themselves. They are always going to be second. And I love that he says, left by the plastic values. And it's not plastic in the sense that it's fake. It's the plastic in the sense that it's malleable and it can change its mind at a whim.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of today. You get this whole conversation around people have lost, or people perceive that people have lost the ability to critically evaluate the things that they're consuming. People say, well, you need to get the ability to critically read. And often what I see that related to is academia, right? Like this ability to kind of do what we are doing now, right? Like analyze something in depth, talk about it, relate it to other things, rather than just like a surface level reading. So that's how I saw this cultivated spectator, right? So he talks about to enjoy Picasso, for example, you need a considerable amount of conditioning, right? A certain amount of learning. When I hear conditioning, and maybe I'm using it wrong, but access and ability to see these things and all that kind of stuff that can come with bourgeoisie, wealth, all this other stuff, right?
Yeah, and this is going to be a rather long quote, but I think, one, it's ingeniously written, but also I think summarizes our own thoughts on his own work. So, you know, sometimes you have to run a mile to walk a step, or whatever the quote is. I don't know. But here's the quote. But today, such a culture of being abandoned by those to whom it actually belongs, our ruling class, for it is the latter that the avant-garde belongs. No culture can develop without a social basis, without a source of stable income. And in the case of the avant-garde, this was provided by an elite among the ruling class of that society, from which it assumed itself to be cut off, but to which it has always remained attached by an umbilical cord of gold. The paradox is real, and now this elite is rapidly shrinking. Since the avant-garde forms the only living culture we now have, the survival in the near future of culture in general is thus threatened. End quote. And I think this is such a vital thing to say, because Clement Greenberg is responding to these movements of art that are being banned in Germany, that are being shooed out of France as totalitarianism and the rise of Hitler is all happening. So he's seeing that, like, as much as he loves kitsch, because you get it from this thing, he it's not that he hates kitsch. He's just like, it is an existence that we live with. But you still need the avant-garde at the end of the day. You still need this like form of ruling caste. So then what is then going to be, who's going to be the tastemakers if the tastemakers are all being killed?
Yeah.
So I think, and honestly, I don't think he ever answers this. He just sort of leaves it there. And he ends this essay with kitsch and totalitarianism, which, as we are still in 2024 and we don't know the results of November, you know, maybe we're looking at this with fond eyes, or we're looking at this with doom and gloom in the future. Who knows? But there is kitsch to Donald Trump. You know, the usage of the red, the legible font, the hats, the maxi padded ears during the summer. These are all performances of kitsch. These are mass consumerist, like low taste things. And, you know, if someone's offended that we're getting political on this, well, art is political, get over it. Even your like low taste stuff is in response to some sort of political endeavor or even just political neutrality, because that is even this is getting complicated, but the point is Clement Greenberg is looking around him and seeing that as fun as kitsch can be, it can also be quite dangerous because it has the eye of the people. And if kitsch and avant-garde are separated, there is a disjoint in what can be a progressiveness can be then reappropriated and misinterpreted. And it's sort of what we're kind of dealing with right now, where there is an attack on academia, there is an attack of knowledge, and it is coming from a place, it stems from a place of insecurity, where academia is becoming increasingly more expensive, and given the financial crisis and all these things that are currently going on, academia and access to academia and access to quote unquote hireable job degree maps, end quote, are sort of limiting the beauty of what is academia, which is learning. Learning different things, learning things that don't make you comfortable, learning more about the world around you. You know, as two academics in the arts, you know, we learn maths, we learn science, you know, so why can't they learn ours? So in a way, I think this is what Clement Greenberg is writing about, is sort of echoing right now within our own unstable foundation of knowledge making, or I guess knowledge taste making, I guess.
Yeah. I want to read a quote, maybe a few quotes that he kind of says at the end of this article, because because I think these really sum up why he sees this kind of danger with kitsch and the relationship to totalitarianism. So he says on page 19 in the one we have, the encouragement of kitsch is merely another of the inexpensive ways in which totalitarian regimes seek to ingratiate themselves with their subjects. They will flatter the masses by bringing all culture down to their level. And then he says it's for this reason that the avant-garde is outlawed, and not so much because a superior culture is inherently a more critical culture. So kind of what you're saying with academia, the ability to critically read, right? This whole conversation we've kind of been having. And then he says, the final quote, kitsch keeps a dictator in closer contact with the soul of the people. Should the official culture be one superior to the general mass level, there would be danger of isolation, right?
Exactly. And, you know, he's talking about art, but he's very well aware that art is something that we see in the everyday. Even if you don't think like you're like art belongs in the museum or whatever, you are looking at art through advertisement. These are the people that are in charge of these things are art directors. They are trained. It's not just some random Joe Schmo off the street. These are people that are cultured. These are people that know what they're doing.
Yeah, I was at a conference talk where somebody was talking about, I think it was right-wing politics and political cartoons. And like he was articulating like how sinister they are, because they seem to be, on the surface, it can be read as like a very, I guess, dumbed down joke. And I don't mean that offensively, but like, you know, like it's a very, you could read something on the surface and like laugh at it if you are that way inclined.
Like, ha ha ha, this is ridiculous.
But then there were other like symbols that were connecting leftist politics to like communism, and it was done in America. So it's like drawing on this history of the Red Scare and stuff like that, right? So like there are deeper levels to these things, but it's done in a way that is
subtle.
Yeah, subtle and for mass consumption. And he was showing like the retweets on this and actual politicians who were retweeting these horrendous like cartoons. Yeah,
because once more, unsaid within the essay but implied, is that to be part of an avant-garde, to be part of these things is hard work. And like honestly, he does acknowledge that you do need money, you do need time. it is a privilege to be part of an avant-garde. Obviously, we are self-funded students, but, we are still privileged people because we're able to pursue our interests. We're sitting in front of our MacBooks, something that isn't a very expensive item that we have worked very hard for, but we are still able to have. And we're, giving this out for free, but like, you also need the time to listen to us. That is a point of privilege. And, at the same time, to create things for the masses and to be able to speak to even just y'all, it does take hard work from your part as well. You have to pay attention to what we're saying. You're probably reading along, doing some work, looking up pictures that we're talking about. These are things that are not easily afforded, and more sinister components of our society also know this and would rather make something a lot easier to read and a lot easier to understand towards their agenda than look at nuance. Mm-hmm. So it is sort of, we're ending this essay sort of, I think, with conflicted feelings, because I don't think it's fully relevant anymore. I think the lines between what is considered avant-garde and kitsch are sort of muddled. But at the same time, if you look at avant-garde politically, I think this essay is extremely relevant. And it does have that danger of certain things. Actually, there is the current danger of these more avant-garde negative beliefs that are now becoming kitsch, that are now becoming part of what we consider the now. And with that lovely note, I think I wanted to end, instead of with our usual, actually, I would say we're doing less fan fiction now because we actually know our guests, and it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, we have a lot of guests this season. If it comes up, it will come up more naturally. Do you know what I mean?
But instead, I did a list of kitsch, and I actually wanted to end with what I consider avant-garde pieces, but I did good taste kitsch, bad taste kitsch in terms of low and high art. So for the first one, I called it Good Taste Kitsch, and it is a 2002 digital art piece called Super Mario Bros. Clouds by Corey Archangel. And it is this old television set with repeat of SNES clouds. So it's like 16-bit clouds with like really nice music. And it's just, I've seen it in person. I don't think it's at display anymore at the Whitney Museum in New York. And I just think it's very nice. What do you think, Hannah, of it?
Yeah, I like it. And it's just like when you're talking about it being easily consumed, like it doesn't require a higher level of thinking. You could just look at it.
Yeah, and even if you're not a video game person, you can see like the beauty and like just the simplicity of the clouds just strolling by, because it's just on constant repeat. And I just thought I'd start off with good as I descend into punches. So we end on a high, don't worry. Bad taste, high kitsch, Jeff Koons. Those stupid little balloon animals that the Kardashians love purchasing for millions of dollars that are, I think, hideous. And you can buy so many like versions of it at like TK Maxx. I think you have like little dog earrings.
I did. They broke, which is unfortunate. But like,
no more kitsch for you.
For like 30 quid, you can get these like balloon dog earrings that are really cute.
For evil high kitsch, it is Cloud Gate by Anish Kapoor, also known as The Bean in Chicago. He hates it being called The Bean. He thinks he's a really high grade artist, that everything he makes is God's gift upon the earth, and kind of sucks. But that's my opinion. I'm sure some like essayist is gonna write to us and be like, "You're wrong. He's actually one of the greatest artists ever created." And everyone's entitled to an opinion.
If you didn't want it to be called The Bean, why would you make it so bean shaped?
Yeah,
questions.
It is bean.
It's a silver bean.
It's a ben.
I was just saying to Paula, like, I didn't know it was called. It had a different name.
And you know what? I'm glad. Just permanent call it The Bean against his will. In the for the last of the high kitsch, we have the category, which I think it's Damien Hirst. I think this crystal skull is just tacky, but as someone that loves the ocean, I kind of like the shark. The fermenting shark, 10 out of 10.
Oh, no.
I love the shark. Some people, well, it also caused a lot of controversy because it is a shark in resin, basically. And people are like, that is evil. Like, why would you put like an animal in there? So in a way, it also can count as avant-garde because there is a reaction.
Do you know what? Actually, this reminds me of my hatred for resin art. All forms. I do not like it.
This is a conversation we're going to have off mic because I concur.
My stomach keeps growling. So if you can hear that, it's literally just my tummy grumbling.
Yeah, no, and I know that there's a lot of resin artists on Etsy that are also going to be. I think this is going to be a controversial podcast. Actually, we're the avant-garde. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. So I call this Midwest Grandma Low Kitsch, which is Thomas Kincaid. Absolutely horrible man. Basically ruined his own fortune by being an alcoholic and an evil man. But he makes these very stereotypical landscapes that you can easily find at any thrift or charity shop in the UK or in the US. He basically made this easily reproducible prints of his paintings and then sold them for like between, I want to say, $200 to $500. So, you know, if you get like a large Kincaid, it can be slightly expensive, but you're not, versus the cost of something like a Koons or a Damien Hirst piece, pennies. Because, you know, these works sell for like millions and, you know, the hits, you know, maybe 1,000. But it was really popular amongst very middle class families that wanted to own a piece of genuine quote unquote art on their wall. And they're largely inoffensive. I find them kind of creepy. They're just like too quiet. So there is a sensation. It's sort of like, all right, it's art. It's art on the wall. Inoffensive. It won't. But he sold so much of it. So it kind of goes into that, like, if there's a buyer, there's a market. And then I wanted to end with the greatest of low kitsch, Mr. Bob Ross. Now that is low kitsch, baby.
Yeah.
You know, Happy Little Trees, it was a show. But in a way, it can also count as avant-garde because it was more about the methods towards these art pieces. And, you know, anyone can make it. So if you go once more to a charity shop, you can possibly find people's versions of a Bob Ross. Because I know Bob Ross's actual paintings are kept in an archive. I guess he is like the low kitsch of acceptability. He's the working man's low kitsch.
He also became like super popular again during COVID, which I think is interesting. My brother used to fall asleep to him painting.
Me too. It's a really nice ASMR because he has a really like gentle voice and like the sound of the paintbrush. So it is, you know, I like it, but it is, you're not going to put that next to, I don't know, Kapoor.
Yeah.
Although that would be hilarious. So nowadays, if this is like the low and highs of kitsch, what then is the avant-garde? So I put in 2 examples, and these will all be linked in the description. The first one, I'm going to switch it up once more for poor Hannah, is Heidi Falasfishi. It's called 3 Friends, and it's this art piece with pink tent with, it is a unique light drawing on photosensitive paper with fencing. So the reason I chose this piece, even though I don't know much about it, it's also not for view. It's because this is something that will have a difficulty being placed inside of a home or a private space. It makes sense, I think, especially for you as you work on museums. This makes sense in a museum.
Yeah.
This is a piece made to be in a museum or to be sold to be put in other museums. But this would be kind of difficult to place within your home. So things like maybe like who would buy a shark to be put in their home? Many people, including me, would buy a shark to put in their home. Mm-hmm. This would be a more difficult thing to have inside. And then the second piece, this one's actually near and dear to my heart. It is from 2022 called F Luna. You can replace the F with another word, by Gavin Sierra Vega. And it's basically this poster with a green background and a middle finger. And basically, it is about Luma, the company in Puerto Rico that is in charge of providing people with actual light and running water. They are not. They're a horrible company. I have even experienced multiple Luna blackouts while visiting my family. So this, while something that's easily reproducible, I put it in the avant-garde because it's directly attacking a company. It's bringing awareness to something that's going on. And it's, once more, it's not something you would hang in your home because it is an aggressive statement. It is going, no. So this would be, even though it's something maybe you will see reproduced a lot, it will be something for protest. It is something that serves a function. And that I think it's using a methodology that is of reproduction, that is of kitsch, but it's kind of circling back around to be something of the avant-garde. And where I want to end this entire rant that I've been going on and sort of get your opinion on everything I've just discussed, I wrote that these items are different from kitsch corporate feminist slogans. For example, women belong in the House and the Senate. These are just vapidly blank statements that anyone can say about anything, but ultimately cultivate to absolutely nothing. It's sort of what we talked about in past episodes with #girlboss and all these other things, where it's feigning this movement, feigning this statement. Like, it is just an echo of something that's an actual issue, an actual problem, or an actual idea. So yes, this is how I sort of categorize all these different art pieces. And I kind of want to get Hannah's response to all this.
So avant-garde is political.
Well, avant-garde can be political.
Oh, yeah.
It's not always political, but it is something, it's pushing, it's ahead of its time. It's pushing the envelope. It's making people feel some sort of way. Whether positive or negative. And kitsch is simply just an echo or the response to something that's being liked or something that's a corporate version. So the reason I use women belong in the House and Senate, it was this t-shirt that was everywhere when Hillary Clinton was running for president. And it meant nothing. I mean, it was, you would wear it to be like, I too am a feminist, but they don't know what that means. So it's just like vapid. It's sort of, it's empty of any significant meaning. It said Hillary Clinton belongs in the White House. That's an actual statement, whether you agree with it or not, but just blank, like any woman belongs there. What does that mean?
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like, maybe it's why these kind of statements, they feel off. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not really saying anything. It's also reminding me of when people have like the word feminist, like the definition of a feminist on a t-shirt, and I'm just like, okay, great.
Yeah, it's like, who made this?
Yeah. Also, there's many different types of feminisms, but okay.
Some of them are more positive than others. J.K. Rowling, I'm looking at you.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this was an interesting episode.
Yeah, this is it's always these shorter essays. It's always these shorter essays that leave us like going into multiple different routes. And it's also amazing, this was his first art historical essay.
Is it kind of like, wasn't that Notes on Camp Sontag's like
big essay as well?
Yeah.
Damn, like are we gonna write like the next great masterpiece?
Maybe we'll be the tastemakers finally.
As I've been told by my partner and multiple people, I have zero taste. My tastes are trash. And I guess with that, we can end.
Yes.
Yes. Look at more art. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Theoryish. We really appreciate it and would love to hear your thoughts. Check out our Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter at Theoryish_pod for up-to-date information. And please rate, follow, and leave a review wherever you're listening to the podcast.
If you're interested in finding anything we have mentioned in the episode, please check our show notes or description to find more details. You can also contact us at theoryishpodcast@gmail.com.
See you next time.
Goodbye.